The fire that you keep fighting might be the one you're creating. One of the easiest traps for an owner to fall into is believing that clarity means giving the people answers. Man, I get it. As we have been taught, this feels like leadership. The owner sees the issue, applies their experience, makes a call, and moves the business forward. In short term, it works. The decision gets made, the problem gets solved, the employees get the direction they need. And to be clear, sometimes the problem at hand does need to be solved immediately. This is not an argument for letting things burn while you turn every issue into a teaching moment. There are moments in business when the owner or leader has to step in, make the call, and put out the fire. But if all you ever do is fight the fire, you shouldn't be surprised next week when you're standing in the smoke once again. We need to stop handing people answers and teach them how the business thinks. The deeper leadership opportunity often comes after the problem is handled. That is when the lesson needs to happen. Once the immediate issue is stabilized, the leader should come back and explain what the thinking behind the direction or decision that was given was. How does it align with the values? What were you taking into consideration? What was, what was the what if that you were trying to kind of prevent from down the road? Like, what were you thinking around the corner on? What trade-off did we accept? And then why did we handle it that way? What showed up in your gut? And this part can be the most difficult, but can also bear the most fruit. Not just for people, but to bring realization and awareness to the massive subconscious genius that you have, that is your gut instinct. That is what's so difficult to transfer. Then we have some instructive questions that we can add to it. What would we want them to notice earlier next time? How do we want them to go through the values evaluation, right? How do we find out what fits, what gets pushed out? What kind of solution should they bring forward if it happens again, right? We don't want them always to bring us questions. We want them to bring us ideas. That follow-up conversation is where the business begins to transfer judgment, not just instruction, not just go do it. They actually transfer empowerment. A conclusion tells someone what they do in one situation. A framework teaches them how to think across many situations. A conclusion creates compliance. A framework creates clarity and confidence. A conclusion might solve, today's issue, but a framework builds the ability to solve tomorrow's issue without having to have the owner involved, without having to bring them back and pull them into the middle of it. This is one of the hidden reasons why so many businesses stay overly dependent on the owner. It's not always because the owner refuses to delegate. Sometimes the owner is delegating tasks, responsibilities, and decisions, but they are not transferring the thinking that goes behind those decisions, the why. So the team comes back. They come back because they were given the answer, not the operating logic that produced the answer. Because you trained them that way with the actions, with what you gave them, they came back to. I've seen this happen with hiring decisions, customer service issues, pricing exceptions, team conflict, vendor problems, quality standards, and even how leaders decide what opportunities to pursue. The owner knows what it right feels like because they have lived the business. They have absorbed the patterns for years, values, mistakes, wins, preferences, and consequences. And so they just know it. But much of that knowledge lives in their head and in their gut. When that thinking is not made visible, the owner becomes the framework. That's a dangerous place for a business to live. It's so risky. When problems arise, you might be required to be a firefighter. Legit, right? That's part of leadership. But I want to invite you to spend more time and more intentional time becoming a fire preventer. If you fight a fire and never come back and ask why it started, why was there dry brush? Why was it made spread? What needs to be cleared out before the next time? You're not leading the business forward. You're just waiting for the next emergency. In business, the brush and dead trees are often unclear expectations, undefined values, weak standards, loose role clarity, inconsistent accountability, poor communication, or decisions that depend too heavily on what only the owner knows. When those things are left unattended, small sparks become big problems. When you intentionally clear them out, the chances and magnitude of future fires gets greatly reduced. A healthier business does not just ask, what does the owner want us to do? It learns to ask better questions. What do our values tell us here? How does this align with our purpose? How does it align with the vision? How does this create clarity? What standard are we protecting? What might be around the future corner that needs to be considered? You can actually train that. What decision would we feel good about in 6 months from now? That we would say, hey, glad I made that decision. These are framework questions. They move the team beyond simple of instructions and into like an aligned judgment. This does not mean that every employee should be making every decision. That'd be sloppy, not empowering. Role clarity still matters. Authority levels still matter. Accountability still matters. But within the right boundaries, people need more than just direction. They need decision-making logic of the business so they can become the champions of their area. This is where values become more than a wall art, right? They become values are clear, defined, actively used, and become part of the company's thinking. And the people understand not just what the business does, but how the business decides. That is the shift that many owners miss. They want people to think like owners, but have never taught them how the owner thinks. They want a stronger ownership, but they keep handing out finished answers instead of explaining the principles, the trade-offs, the standards behind those answers. What wakes you up in the middle of the night? The next time someone brings you a problem, solve what must be solved, put out the fire if the fire needs to be put out, but don't stop there. Come back afterward and teach the framework. Explain why you gave the direction you gave. Share the questions you want them to ask next time. Ask them to bring you not only the issues, but bring an idea that aligns with the values, the standards, and the decision-making framework of the business. That is how you begin moving from owner-dependent decisions to value-aligned, champion-driven decisions. The goal is not to make yourself unnecessary. The goal is to make the business stronger because your thinking, no longer has to live in your head and only in your head. It's within them. Stop handling people answers. Teach them how the business thinks. And make sure that you are spending intentional time, not only fighting fires, but preventing them. I look forward to supporting you along your journey. And if you're looking for support now, you can go to callwithbrad.com and book an Epitome Coaching Experience meeting, ECX. It's a program I have called the Epitome Coaching Experience. It's 6 weeks of free coaching. So you do have to qualify, you do have to meet the standards. But if you do, there's an opportunity for you to work with me one-on-one for 6 weeks and see what kind of clarity you can create in your business and I can support you with. I look forward to talking with you. I look forward to walking with you along your journey. Have yourself an amazing, wonderful day.